Hi, folks. Welcome to Just Roots Kitchen Intuition. We are here today to make a delicious summery stew that's also hearty and filling. It's Pozole Verde. So this recipe uses pozole or hominy sort of as a grain, which is a corn that has been treated with an alkali. This is a ancient recipe and it's absolutely delicious. It combines bright summer flavors with sort of this super filling, yummy stew. I wish you could see my cutting board up close right now because it's full of so many incredible vegetables from Just Roots and surrounding farms that are all going to be going into this stew. So it's really healthy, veggie packed, and we're going to be using local chicken breasts from Reed Farm to go along with it. So I'm going to do a quick little overview of some of the ingredients that were in your kit if you received one, and some things that are additional that you could bring to the table to help elevate this dish, and some of the quick materials or supplies I'm going to be using to make the dish. We'll start off. We have 2 boneless chicken breasts. I've also made this recipe with chicken thighs, so if you prefer, you could swap that out. I have homemade broth. So I'm going to use about 6 cups of homemade broth. And if you don't have that, if you got a box container, you can use 4 cups of chicken stock that's in a box. That's kind of already pre-measured for you. And an additional 2 cups of water. Or if you have extra broth, go ahead and use all 6 of broth. It's up to you. We have these gorgeous tomatillos. These have little casks or husks on them that we're going to remove, and we're going to dice them. And I'm just getting some folks joining us, so welcome. We're just going over supplies for making our pozole verde today. So we have tomatillos, some limes. These won't be added till the end. We're going to be juicing these. I've got some fresh cilantro. This is optional. I really think it helps bring some incredible flavor, but some people think cilantro tastes like soap. You could exchange it for another herb, maybe fresh scallions or parsley, whatever you like. I'm going to use most of it blended into our stew and some of it as a garnish. I'm using garlic, anywhere from 6 cloves to a whole head, depending on how much garlic you like. We know garlic's a good antimicrobial, great for the fall season, fighting off some viruses and colds and flus. We also have onions. You can use 1 large onion, 2 small onions, something like that. This is sort of a folk method recipe, so if you love onions and garlic, use more. We had some incredibly beautiful dried ancho peppers in our kit. So these peppers are going to be used to flavor the base of our soup in the stock. We won't be eating them. We'll pull them out at the very end. Ancho peppers are mild, so I'm going to use 2, but use your best judgment. They're quite mild. They bring a chocolatey, smoky flavor and a boldness to that stock. We've got some fresh zucchini or summer squash. We're going to cube these. They're going to be a sort of fresh, crunchy part. We add them at the end of our soup. Some dried oregano. We're going to use a whole 4th cup. That's a lot of oregano. That will be in the tomatillo sauce. Some sweet corn. I already husked one of mine, and if you're looking for something to do right now, you can start husking your corn. There's 3 ears. You don't have to use them all. We're kind of using it as a garnish. We're going to toast it. So you might only want to use 1 ear of corn and save the other 2 for dinner on the grill or something like that. The pozole, of course, or the hominy. So this has been pre-soaked overnight and cooked, and I'll talk about that in just a second. I just did some additional things. I grabbed some cabbage, some kind of getting old cabbage that I had in my fridge, and I shredded it finely. That's an option for a garnish, as well as you could slice up some fresh radishes, use pickled onions. You could also do some avocado as a garnish. None of that is totally necessary, but it's nice to add. And the same thing, if you like a little heat, you can add some jalapeno or other hot pepper. So that's pretty much it for the produce, and then onto supplies really quickly. I'm going to use a cast iron pan. I'm going to try to use this both for toasting the corn and heating our tomatillo sauce until it turns a deep green color. Try to minimize on dishes. And I also have a large stock pot with a lid. So anything you're going to fit 6 cups plus tons of vegetables, 6 cups of stock plus tons of veggies that we're going to cook most everything in today. I have a bowl just for putting corn or any vegetables you chop. You can put them to the side in extra bowls if that's helpful for you. Some more bowl. A lime or lemon squeezer, some measuring spoons if you like to be precise, a measuring cup, and yeah, that should be it for us. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into the pozole preparation. So if you're here live, you probably have already done this. If not, no worries. Pozole can come in a can where it is already, I'll just show you this. It's already cooked, and so you really just need to heat it. So you can buy these at your regular grocery store. Or you can get pozole that is dried and you need to rehydrate it and cook it. So in order to rehydrate it, I just stick it in a bowl of water, fill with extra water to the top, and let it sit overnight for 24 hours. When I'm ready to cook it, I'm going to drain that water, refill with new water, and basically for 2.5 to 3 hours, I'm going to put it on the stove with that water covering way over the top. Bring it to a boil and then lower to a simmer, and then set your timer for 2.5 hours. And you can start to taste the pozole. It should have a crunch or not a crunch. It should have a chewy texture, but it shouldn't be crunchy. And so after 2.5 hours, usually the pozole is done. Something to look out for is that you may need to add more water to keep it submerged. And it's great to add maybe a half teaspoon or a teaspoon of salt. The bags that came in our kits have a lot more than you need for tonight, so you can turn it into another meal tomorrow. I'm going to use about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of cooked pozole in our stew. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get started with our broth. So as I mentioned, we're going to use our ancho peppers to flavor our broth. I'm going to get my stock pot ready, and I'm going to pour in 6 cups of chicken stock, or you could do 4 cups of chicken stock and 2 cups of water. Doesn't really make a huge difference because there's so much flavor going in here. So I'm going to drop my peppers at the bottom. Add in my stock, and now you see you're going to want to make sure you have a pan that's big enough to fit this, plus all these amazing veggies. I'm going to turn this on high because I want it to come to a boil before I lower it to simmer. Great. So we're going to go ahead and get started with cutting our chicken. So this is kind of a neat, nice and easy recipe, whether you have bone-in chicken or just chicken breast. You don't have to do too much to the start because we're going to be spreading it. This chicken, the breasts are attached by a piece of skin. You may remove the skin or you might leave it on. I like to leave skin on when I'm making stews and soups to add in some extra fat and flavor. So what I'm going to do is just cut across the middle, just cutting those breasts in half and making sure that I'm separating the skin. Now is a fine time to remove the skin if you don't want it, or any other fat, but as I mentioned, I like to keep that on as flavoring. So I've got these 2 nice big breasts, and eventually I'm going to pull them out and I'm going to shred them. So you don't really have to cut it any further than that. Once that pot with your broth comes to a boil, we'll add the chicken and lower it to a simmer. For now, I'm going to wash my hands quick. You're either going to want to wash your knife or use a new clean knife. And we're going to prep veg. So we're breaking this into a few easy steps. prepping the vegetables is our next one. We'll go ahead and get started with our onion. So, as I mentioned, I'm using just, one medium onion, one small onion. You could use two small, one large, folk method style. And just get that onion diced up. It's gonna go into a food processor, so it really doesn't have to be perfect, just enough so that your blender or food processor can handle it. I'm just removing those outer skins. I'm trying not to cry. And you're gonna do that to both of your onions. You can really even leave it in quarters if you have a nice high-powered food processor. So I just cut off ends, slice it in half, and I find that's a pretty easy way to remove those outer skins. Especially if I'm not going for a fine dice and doing the trick to keep the onion together to make it easier to dice. All right, and I'll probably just cut those in half and set them aside for now. We're also going to be adding garlic to the same food processor at the same time as the onions. So use your intuition about how much garlic you think you'd want in your soup. This is a very garlicky soup traditionally. You can use 6 cloves, you can use a whole head. I'm going with about half of a head of garlic, and what I'm going to do is peel it, smash it, and then just stick it in the bowl with the onions to be food processed later. And I'm really starting to cry now. I always feel like nice local produced onions are like so much stronger, probably more medicinal for our bodies too than grocery store onions. So I've got just over 1/2 of a garlic head here, some nice big cloves. I'm giving them a smash. This is going to make it easier to get the skins off usually. So just if anyone's considering making this dish and they're vegetarian, that is totally possible. You do not have to use chicken in the dish. It will be delicious with just the pozole, the corn, all the veggies that are in it. And if you're looking to substitute something that's like feels a little meaty or heartier, you can definitely use some maybe like thick sliced portobello mushroom and just add those towards the end of making the soup. I think that would be delicious. So I've got my cloves of garlic going in with the onion. And now I'm going to take a minute to wipe my eyes because I'm really crying. Next, we're going to husk our corn and slice it off the cob. Slice these kernels off the cob. So just separating from the very top. This can be kind of messy. It's great to do outside. If you have a second, you can certainly pop outside and husk away. I sometimes like to leave like what I call the handle on there to make it easier to cut the kernels off the cobs. Another alternative here is if you're grilling already, you can stick your corn on the grill, no butter, no oil necessary, and get the same sort of toasted char that we're looking for the corn. So the next part, when you are cutting the corn off the cob, it can be a little bit dangerous because corn likes to roll around, and it can be a little bit messy because you're using force downwards to get the corn off the cob, and they like to fall off your cutting board. So sometimes I do it into a bowl, but I'll show you beforehand just on my cutting board. One strategy that I use is I want my corn to be flat on the cutting board, so I cut off the round end so I have a nice flat surface to set it on. And then I'm just going to use my knife, trying not to hit the core, but to get as much of the kernel as possible. And you see how messy that can be. I'll pick up those kernels. We did this last week, so or last month, so if folks were in our workshop, you've probably experienced this and you know all about it. See why it's nice to have this handle on here? It gives you a little extra room to cut at the top of the cob. Great. I like to save the cobs for my dog to chew on. Loves the sweet corn. And we'll do the same thing with the rest of our cobs. Now, remember, if you don't think you're going to use that much corn garnish, then maybe, whoops, okay, that's going. Then maybe just save 2 of them and have them for dinner another night, or make one of the salads from our previous episode of Kitchen Intuition where we made a toasted corn and tomato salad. It was so delicious. I'm just going to go ahead and cut off all of mine. If there's any spots on your corn that look a little icky, just cut them right off. A lot of times organic corn or IPM corn will still allow some little larvae to get in because they're not spraying it, which is a good sign, good for your health, in my opinion. So just cut that off if you see any graying of the cob or rotten parts. You can still eat the rest. I'm almost done here with dekerneling my corn and making a mess of my kitchen. But it's oh so worth it. The toasting or caramelizing of the corn really brings out some incredible flavor. Next, I'm going to get my little pan. I'm using a cast iron pan. I'm going to get it set up with 2 tablespoons of olive oil for roasting. You want to make sure there's enough room on your pan for all the corn to be able to touch the bottom. That's how we're going to get that nice browning, that beautiful color that we want. You can measure out 2 tablespoons, or you can just eyeball it. If you have a little too much, no problem. If you have a little too little, you can always add more. So 2 tablespoons, 1 and 2, and basically you just want it to evenly coat the bottom of your pan. Go ahead and turn that on medium heat. I'm going to pick up the corn I dropped on the ground. Great. I'm going to let that oil start to almost shimmer before I drop the corn in. I want it to be nice and warm. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and prep the rest of our vegetables. So we're gonna remove these outer casks of your tomatillos. Sometimes they can have a little bit of dirt on them, depending on what the weather was like. Like if it's really rainy, dirt can splash up on the tomatillos and gets under those casks, so you might want to rinse it. You might notice that there's a bit of a waxiness. That's totally normal. And you really don't need to rinse it unless your tomatillos are dirty. So I'm basically just going to the bottom, opposite the stem side, It's already sort of open. You can use that opening to peel up to the top, and then you just sort of pluck the cask off by pulling it up. So kind of satisfying and fun to do. These are also going to go with the garlic and onion once they're chopped up. Same situation, you can dice it. If you don't have a super high power food processor, or just leave it in chunks if you do. Come a little closer. Let down my knife here. So I'm just going to cut it in fourths, or you could do a little more than that if you want. And if there's kind of a large hard part of the stem, go ahead and take that off. You don't need it. So the tomatillo is what gives this this dish obviously it's verde, so it's green. It's what gives it a beautiful green color. And it's not until the tomatillo, onions and garlic are stewed that we get this deeper green that we're looking for. There's another recipe that I really love that has similar ingredients, called yocon, and that's a Guatemalan stew that uses pretty much the same ingredients here, but a lot of bell pepper as well. And yocon, in that dish, the tomatillos, the garlic, and the onions are roasted in the oven before we process it into super stew. That's a really cool recipe. You can check it out. If you have New York Times, they have a great recipe for it, or reach out to us and we'll get you one. So yeah, again, chopping these tomatillos, removing the stem, removing the casks, getting them ready for a food processor or blender. And this is all happening while my stock is coming up to a boil, which it's a lot of liquid, so it's taking a little bit of time. I might turn mine to a double boil for the sake of time. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to be doing here, or we actually have two more here for prepping vegetables, is just doing a rough chop of our cilantro. And we're going to dice up our zucchini. So the zucchini is not going to be going in with the tomatillos, tomatoes, and garlic that are going to be blended. At this point, your pan with olive oil should be getting pretty warm. Again, we're on medium heat. Mine's not quite there. I'm going to give these zucchini a rinse. We want our oil for the corn to be shimmering. We want it hot when we drop it in there. And you may get a little bit of like oil splashing because corn has a lot of water in it. So just be careful. I'm cutting off the ends of my zucchini. Really we just added zucchini to this recipe just to get more veggies packed into a delicious dish. So you can do it without zucchini if you'd like. I'm going to be dicing it, and a trick that I like to do is I kind of like to cut my zucchini into sort of long slivers here, and then sometimes I'll stack them, and then I can make some nice even dicing. Now, this is totally, the smaller you dice this, the quicker the end cook time is going to be because we're just adding these at the end. So just keep that in mind. I basically made four or three vertical cuts and then a couple horizontal. And now I'm just going through and dicing them into little cubes. I can hold up a few pieces so you can see for size reference. Zucchini cooks pretty fast in soups, but the nice skins keep a good texture. There it is. And put those aside to a bowl. We're not going to do this today, but if you did want to, you could certainly salt your zucchini to get excess moisture out, put it in a colander, let it sweat. But I think it's fine. This soup is going to be really flavorful. All right, I'm at a boil, which means it's time to lower to a simmer, and we're going to add our chicken. Lower to a simmer. Add my chicken. And I'm doing skin side down here. Got a little bit of water in my pan. Skin side down. If you left your skins on, not a big deal if it doesn't get skin side down. And then I'm going to cover it up again so it's on a simmer. And then we're going to let that cook. We're going to set a timer for 25 minutes and check on it then. So that's what I did. Moved myself to a simmer. And it'd be good. At this point, your pan should be ready to toss on some corn. You want to hear that beautiful sizzling sound when you put your corn on. I'm going to rinse out this bowl and reuse it when my corn is ready to go, so I can store it for later. So just to catch us up, I've got my corn caramelizing. We're just browning our corn. That's going to be a topping for the pozole. We've got all of our ingredients chopped except for the cilantro that will be blended to make the tomatillos sort of paste. And then we have our broth with chicken and ancho peppers sort of stewing at the moment. And we're in the middle of chopping zucchini, which won't be added until later. Make sure to spread the corn evenly and give it some nice stir so we can coat the kernels evenly in the olive oil. You'll notice it really does sop up a lot of that oil, which is a good thing because that's when you get browning happening. And I'm going to keep that at medium-high heat while I finish up here. So again, making strips sort of, and then dicing. Should you want to use one zucchini for this recipe, no problem. You can use one, two. If you really want to pack it in, you can add some more vegetables. This soup just has such good flavor, a great balance of acidity and sweetness, umami. It's really yummy. If you've had salsa verde at Mexican restaurants, that's made with tomatillos. Tomatillos have sort of a short ephemeral life. And so if you can get to a farmer's market and get some more, I highly suggest making the most of it. Freezing salsa, you won't see them till around this time next year. So love having access to local produce. All right, going to set that to the side. We don't need it right now, and we're going to give this corn a stir. It makes sense to check to make sure that your chicken and broth and ancho peppers are indeed simmering and not just sort of lightly heating. Yep, we've got a simmer, so that's great. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a rough chop on my cilantro, saving, a few pieces for garnish. If you don't have cilantro, it's okay. It's kind of a hard one to come by, and it's sort of hard to put in our kits because it goes bad so quickly. What I do when I get cilantro fresh from Just Roots is I wrap it in a paper towel and put it in a Ziploc bag, and that paper towel is going to be slightly damp. So I'll wet it with some water, and that really helps preserve the life. I'm just doing a rough chop. Again, it's going in the blender, and you'll notice I am using the stems. That's totally fine to do, as long as they're not woody or really tough. So maybe I'd take out a little bit of the stem. So I've got cilantro, tomatillos, onions, garlic, and our fourth cup, measure out a fourth cup of oregano, dried. I'm using sort of a large blender that is basically great at food processing. You may have to do yours in batches if you have a smaller food processor, but all of those ingredients are going to go into the blender. Your tomatillos, your garlic, your onion chunks, your oregano. And if you have your cilantro, that's going to go in there too. Cutting board a bit. This is also, we're going to stir the corn often, but it's also okay to let it sit for a little bit, because you do want that browning happening. Okay. I'm going to process this mixture of vegetables in my food processor. And then what I'm going to do is, well, I'm only going to pulse it. I'm not going to like puree it yet because there's not a lot of liquid in it. So while I pulse it, I'm going to do it like 5 or 6 times so everything's sort of miniature diced. And then I'll tell you the next step. But I'm going to pause my audio so you don't have to hear it for a second. All right, so I've got some nice chunks in there. Some of it's starting to puree, and I really want to add a bit more water to it. So the way that I'm going to do that is by getting 1 cup of the cooking liquid, the broth, and pouring it in to make this puree. And maybe stir your corn while you're at it. At this point, you're probably starting to smell the like incredible caramelizing of the sugars in the corn. And it's just so nice. It smells so good. There's something really comforting about that scent. If you're getting burning on the bottom, you're just going to lower the heat. And corn never fails to be messy. So you might get some kernels popping and flying around your kitchen. But mine still needs a bit of time. So I'm going to get out a measuring cup. I'm going to fill up about 1 cup of the broth. It's okay if it's a little more, a little less, and pour it into that blender. Then I'm going to run it again, puree it for like 30 seconds or longer, depending on your needs. You want a nice, smooth puree. I'm going to turn off my audio again. Beautiful green puree. It's like a nice light green, and there's specks of cilantro in there. You can see the tomatillo seeds, which give this dish great texture. So that is all set. Your corn may or may not be ready yet. I'm just going to see if I can't get some to show you. Probably won't show up on that camera. No, it will not. But I've got browning on the edges of the corn. It's going to be super sweet and smoky tasting. So I know that that's about time that I can pull it off of heat and set it aside. If your corn's not ready yet, just keep toasting. That's no problem. I'm actually, just to keep things simple, going to use a different pan on the same burner, which is still nice and hot, to prep ourselves for the next part of this dish. And you'll notice I'm always cleaning up a little bit because my brain works better outside of the chaos of the kitchen. My own mess. All right. So now we're gonna basically heat up our tomatillos. So it's got the broth. Now it's time to add a bit of seasoning. I suggest adding 1 teaspoon of salt to start. So you can use a measuring spoon for that if that's helpful for you. I'm gonna toss it you can put it in the blender or into the pan that you're gonna be working with. It doesn't really matter. So 1 teaspoon. And then we're gonna do black pepper to taste. And I always say black pepper to taste. Just because everybody likes different amounts of pepper. I like a lot. You can also add like roasted hot red pepper flakes or something if you're someone that likes a lot of heat. Just know that we will have another chance to season, so not overdoing it is probably the best thing to do. We're going to basically do the same thing we did with the corn, heat 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm using a cast iron pan. Just use something that is sort of heavy bottomed, and you know that you can fit all of your tomatillo sort of sauce into. It could also be a pot, doesn't need to be a pan, but you know, you got to fit it all in there. Okay, got my 2 tablespoons down. I'm going to heat that again till it's shimmering. And my pan's probably going to heat up fast because my stove was already on from the corn. I'm basically, in a moment, once that pan is warm, we're going to go ahead and heat it for 10 to 12 minutes. What we're looking for, it's going to be on medium heat. We're going to look for a deeper green. So we're just basically getting some nice like heat going into those onions, that garlic, the tomatillos. It's not a highly cooked part of this dish, so you are going to get some brighter, fresher flavors for it, which will be enhanced when we add lime juice a little bit later. Let's go ahead while we're waiting, and if I'm moving too fast, don't worry, you always have more time. But I'm going to juice a couple limes that I know I'm going to be using. I'm just going to start off with 2. And the lime juice is going to get poured in at the very end. We're not going to pour it in any earlier because we don't want to lose a lot of that vibrancy and acidity. I always like to roll my limes before I use them. Just think it helps loosen. And you might even want to add all 3 of the limes from your kit. Depends on how much brightness. You'll add it in a little bit at a time. There is acidity in tomatillos, so keep that in mind. May seem like a whole ton of lime juice, and it is, but we're making a big pot of soup. It's probably going to serve 6 people or make 6 meals. So it's almost like it's spaced out quite a bit. Sometimes I double the limes back through my press. Make sure I'm getting all of the bits out of there. All done with that. I don't know if you heard, but my lime juice splashed a tiny bit in my pan, which makes me think my oil is glistening. It is. It's just about to smoke. So we're going to add our paste or our All right, and my pan is still on medium heat. So we're going to be cooking this and stirring it for a little bit, 12 minutes, which is pretty much what I have left on my chicken. So it's timing out perfectly. Just using a spatula to get out every last little bit I can. Tomatillos have such a unique and amazing smell. Now I'm sort of using my spatula or cooking spoon, whatever you're using, to mix the olive oil into the tomatillo, garlic, tomato, and cilantro paste, you could call it. Beautiful color. And then we're just going to be sitting here for 10 minutes until we can pull the chicken out. You can use your hand or forks once the chicken cools enough to shred it or pull the chicken. Then we're going to add our hominy, this tomatillo sauce, and our diced squash back into the soup over medium heat. Season it some more with salt and pepper. Let it cook until these zucchinis are nice and tender. Add our lime juice and then plate. You could totally serve this over rice if you want, but there's already this amazing rich grain. If you haven't had hominy, you can try a piece. It sort of is similar to rice, almost more delicious in my opinion. Because your tomatillo sauce is gonna be on medium heat, you may have some bubbling happening. So just make sure to like stir it every once in a while. I'm going to turn off my mic for a minute while I get cleaned up since we still have 8 minutes, and for me, 8 minutes and 30 seconds before we're going to pull our chicken out. So I'll be right back. So one of my favorite things to garnish this dish with, we actually haven't discussed yet, but I love to add a little bit of like crunch on top, and a really like easy, delicious way to do that is just take store-bought tortillas, maybe stack 2 or 3 of them, slice them into thin strips, heat them with some olive oil until they're crispy on a pan like a cast iron, sprinkle some salt and pepper, and you have these little like shriveled tortilla chips on top. That's super yummy. Also, pickled or regular sliced radish is absolutely delicious with pozole. So if you have a farmer's market near you or you grow food yourself, thinly slicing radish. You can also matchstick them. Another great, absolutely delicious fresh addition. So I just like to slice them thin into rounds, and then sometimes I'll stack them and matchstick them. And that way you're not getting such a strong bite of radish because they're just little pieces. But I don't really mind a strong bite. So, and then of course with my cilantro, I just finely chop the cilantro. Again, no huge mouthfuls of it, but you know, if you like cilantro, you can leave whole leaves. You want to do pickled jalapeno, regular jalapeno, just slice. That's a little too hot for me. But I like it pickled. I think it removes some of the acidity. And then I keep dropping radishes. Finely shaped cabbage. I just used a vegetable peeler and went against the grain on my cabbage and worked out great. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left in class and only a few things left to do, so that's kind of perfect. Get my cabbage, finish slicing my garnish. Oh, and another thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but it's also really nice to add a creamy texture to this soup, and you can get that from some sliced avocado over the top. It'll really just make a beautiful color palette with it. For instance, I have this purple cabbage and these pink red radishes, some green avocado, the nice white yellowy pozole. Plenty of that. And then, as I mentioned, I do use the stems when I chop cilantro, especially if I'm going to chop it finely. I sort of just smush it all as much as I can into a ball and carefully, thinly slice. Sort of like the cigar method when you're doing pale or colored greens. Go through it once or twice. Beautiful. I think last time I had this, I served it with pickled onions, which was really yummy. We can also save one of the limes for a garnish as well. Slice it into pieces. Of course, jalapeno. I'm starting to get a deeper, richer green color, which is great. And through this simmering process, we're losing some of the excess moisture or water that was in our dish, which is broth in this case, so it's not so bad, but I sometimes like to give it a little taste and just see how we're doing. Amazing. Oh my God. It tastes a lot like tomatillo salsa, and it's going to be a little bit salty, but just remember, this is what's flavoring our soup, so don't worry about that. I'm going to turn my timer off here and remove the lid. I've got these beautiful puffy amber peppers. These did a wonderful job flavoring, but now it's time for them to come out. They went from a green sort of to a purple color, which is really cool. I'm also removing my chicken at the moment. So the chicken and the peppers are coming out. And they will go back in, so it's okay if they're not completely shreddy, fully a party. And then at this point, your tomatillo sort of paste is going to go in. So if you're using a heavy pan like mine, just be careful. I'm just pouring all of that in there. And using a spatula to get the rest out. Smells so oregano-y. It's really nice. Oops, I missed a bunch. Set that in the sink, and I'm turning the heat off from where it was. Okay. Then I'm going to make sure this comes back up to a boil. We want to get it hot again. And now we're going to add in our zucchini. And we're going to add in our hominy. And all of a sudden, this has become a really hearty stew, and we haven't even put the chicken back in it. Go ahead and give that a stir. By the way, of course, I drained my hominy from the water it was cooking in. Okay, we're gonna cook this until the squash are tender, probably about 15 minutes. And then basically we just plate it with, we add our lime juice and plate it up and add our chicken back in. It's normally, I would wait to do this, but because we only have a few minutes left of class, I'm going to, you can shred the chicken with your hands once it's cool, or you can use a knife, sort of start to break it apart. You can use 2 forks, but basically I'm just breaking up that chicken with a knife because I want to do this a little quicker. Should be just at the point where it's wanting to fall apart, which is great. You can just, I'm applying really light pressure with this knife to get it to shred. Again, chicken thigh. Oh, and if you would like to, you can now remove the skin and just get rid of that. It kind of just comes off on its own. I really, really like doing this recipe with chicken thighs. That wasn't available for us to order locally. But if you try it again, I highly suggest chicken thighs. Breast is nice too, but thighs are my favorite. You could also do a really simple roasted pork butt where you throw in some pork butt, salt and pepper in the oven, just dry in a pan, sort of like what we're making our soup in, that's oven safe. And then roast it on 200 for like 9 or 10 hours. Just leave it alone. Make your soup and then add that roasted pork butt to it, and it would be so good. So this breast specifically really is shredding, so that's great. So it's going to take a little bit for that squash to cook. Once it's tender to your liking, add your chicken back in. I might add mine in now. And add your lime juice and then serve with all of your favorite garnishes. Check for seasonings to adjust salt and pepper if you'd like some more. And you have a under an hour meal, or just at an hour, which is incredible. And don't forget to add your corn, of course. because the corn adds this incredible flavor to the dish. Okay, folks, we only have 2 minutes left. Happy to take any questions. And if not, I hope everyone enjoys your dinner tonight. It's absolutely one of my fave stews now that I know how to make it. And yeah. All right. Thanks for joining Just Roots and Kitchen.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
How do we use that hot dried pepper? Did I miss that?
I think so. So the hot dried pepper we used at the very beginning, we poured 6 cups or 4 cups of chicken stock and 2 cups of water into a stock pot, and we added the dried pepper. So that flavors the base of our soup. And then we removed the dried pepper right before we added the cut up chicken back in.
And how many peppers?
It was up to you. So it's a mild pepper, quite mild. I did 2 peppers, but if you are really intolerant to spice, maybe just do 1. Otherwise, I think 2 to 3 is totally fine. I would save them if you can. They're such a treat for flavoring stuff. I love throwing them into big roasts in the oven and letting them steam and infuse meats. And yeah.
And so I have one burner. I live really tiny, and I picked up my order. I did not read the directions about the hominy, so it's soaking. I started soaking it about, I guess, 4 hours ago, maybe a little more, 5 hours ago. And the chicken, do I cook that with the tomatillos or separately?
So I'm going to go back. Maybe it would be helpful if I went from the top, just so you don't miss anything. So once we brought our broth to a boil with the peppers, I added the chicken breast and I just left them whole. And then the chicken cooks in that broth for about 25 minutes. So that's cooked together.
I have an
Meanwhile,
instant, I could
go
do
ahead.
that. I have an instant pot, so I can play with that, but I have one
Okay.
burner, so I'm trying to juggle. And I've been cooking along with you.
Okay, great. So you could actually even put your pozole in the Instapot to cook it quicker too. There's probably recipes online for cooking hominy in the Instant Pot,
Okay.
just like you would beans to make it go faster.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then so after I brought that chicken to a simmer with a 25-minute timer, I cut up my tomatillos, cilantro, onion, and garlic and blended those in a food processor. And eventually you like cook the tomatillos down a little bit in a pan and you add that back into your stock.
Okay, so that, and I missed that because that includes the zucchini.
The zucchini goes in. Do you have a copy of the recipe? We could email you one if that's helpful. So the zucchini goes in at the end just before you put lime juice. I just put mine in and I'm letting it simmer for about 15 minutes until the zucchini is tender. So it's many steps. I know it can be a lot. But happy
Well,
to
I wanted to try something different because my go-to are more Middle Eastern food and Indian and that kind of those regions. And I wanted something, yeah, different. So thank you. I will look at the recipe, and I don't have a printer, but I can look online at what you sent.
great.
Yeah.
If you ever want to share some of your favorite recipes to make from, Indian cuisine or whatever it is you like to cook, we'd love to check them out and see if maybe we could replicate, do a cooking workshop. We're always looking for ideas and inspiration.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Irene, I think we can stop the recording.